They tried it again. In the grey light north of Pokrovsk, engines coughed to life. Motorcycles darted forward like stingers, and a battalion's worth of Russian armour rolled into the teeth of Ukraine's kill zone. For the second time in a week. 12 armoured vehicles and tanks gone, up to 100 men left on the field. The question hangs in the smoke. Why repeat a tactic that keeps getting ripped apart on camera? The footage, much of it from Azov National Guard units and Ukrainian air assault brigades, tells the story in frames. Columns trying to thread the approach, electronic warfare humming to blind drones, and then the moment the plan meets reality. FPV hits, mortars finding rhythm, artillery walking in. It is a grim déjà vu of a mechanized assault that failed just a couple days ago. And yet here we are again, watching the same play called into the same defense. If war had a replay button, someone seems to be hammering it. To appreciate why this sector keeps exploding into headlines, step back. The Pokrovsk area, call it a junction of ambition and attrition, is deadly for both sides. Ukrainian defenders are not on some triumphant march. They are holding ground under constant pressure, bleeding, rotating, surviving. What makes these episodes stand out is scale. Battalion-sized armoured pushes are rare in a war increasingly atomized into squads, drones, and small unit probes. When a whole wave of steel appears, it's cinematic, and lately, catastrophically one-sided. Take the October sequence. On the 9th and 10th, multiple large assaults, up to 5 attempts, slammed into Ukrainian lines. On the 13th, they tried again around Dobropilia, with forces drawn from 3 motorized rifle brigades and a marine brigade, 17 armoured combat vehicles and a tank in the first grouping, motorcyclists leading, armoured carriers hauling infantry, and EW suites pulsing to suppress Ukrainian UAVs. The plan was textbook: get infantry onto the objective, consolidate, push the line. The result was carnage: 9 IFVs, 4 APCs, 3 tanks and 3 motorcycles destroyed, with Ukrainian sources estimating 78 to 100 Russian KIA. If you're counting at home, that's not a minor setback. That's a smoking crater in an ORBAT spreadsheet. Ukrainian mill blogger K. Machevets laid out the anatomy of the push. First, covert small groups tried to slip in along groves and edges toward the eastern outskirts of Shevchenkove, nuzzling up via the tree lines from Poltava and Popivrar. Some foothold was gained east of the road, but it was tenuous. Then came the heavy breath. Several assault companies reinforced by tanks. Estimates differ, but everyone agrees there were at least 12 armoured vehicles pressing in, enough steel to make the ground vibrate, and enough signatures to make Ukrainian fire missions salivate. Machevets' bottom line was stark. 1 to 2 enemy battalions, especially their assault echelons, took significant losses. You'd expect a counter-story from the Russian side, a triumphant communique, a map splashed with arrows. Instead, silence, or more precisely, a foggy mumble. The Russian MOD acknowledged action in the general direction and claimed the liberation of a small settlement southeast of Mirnorad, with progress alleged toward Rodinska and pressure aimed at Shevchenkove. But even Russian-friendly channels mostly avoided the specifics of these pushes. When the only clear narrative comes from your opponent's overlapping drone feeds, it's not because you've achieved information dominance. It's because you've lost a lot of vehicles in a very public way. So what exactly went wrong? Again, on paper, the concept isn't insane. Use EW to degrade enemy UAVs, use fast bikes to mark lanes and induce quick dismounts, dump infantry forward in a rush, seize a hamlet or tree line, and force the defender to fight your tempo. The trouble is that this isn't 1987, and the defender's eyes aren't just a handful of glass optics and a forward observer with a radio. It's a lattice of small drones, thermal spotters, gunners with live coordinates, and a kill chain that can close from sighting to strike in minutes, sometimes seconds. If your EW isn't overwhelming, and here it wasn't, the drones don't go away, they multiply. The first wave is the deadliest, just not for who planned it. Motorcyclists are fast, brave, and tragic in a world where quadcopters perch above intersections like judgmental pigeons. Even if they clear the forward minelets and mark a route, every plume of dust and each engine heat trace is a pointer for the next loitering munition. The APCs that follow get a little near. They start dismounting the infantry, and that's when the defenders' orchestra starts playing. Mortars bracketing the LZ, artillery shearing the tree line, and FPV teams flitting in to finish whatever crawls. It's combined arms, just not the kind the attacker hoped to face. Another pattern emerges in the aftermath. When dismounts do get ashore, they struggle to consolidate. In theory, infantry creates a bubble for armor to work. In reality, drones pop that bubble. Small groups isolate in culverts or sheds. Platoon sergeants become air defense officers with nothing but prayer and a camouflage net. Ukrainian units speak matter-of-factly about hunting down these groups with small UAVs guiding indirect fire. It isn't fair. It isn't supposed to be. That's the point of a defense that has adapted to attrition. Make every forward step cost more energy than the attacker can afford to burn. It's tempting to laugh off the operational logic. If at first you don't succeed, buy more motorcycles. But the Ukrainians caution against that. The sector remains very, very deadly, with Russian mass accumulating and poking in multiple directions daily. Ukraine's defenders have the better exchange ratio when big assaults roll in, yet they pay a price to keep the line intact. Don't let a viral clip of a tank brew up fool you into thinking it's easy. Defense here is work. Bloody, disciplined, exhausting work. Still, the question lingers. Why keep trying the big push? Part of it is doctrine. Mechanized shock retains a gravitational pull in Russian planning. Part is politics. Visible advances, however fleeting, can feed a narrative. And part may be a simple, brutal calculus. If small probes aren't cracking the lodgement, maybe weight will. In a war that constantly pressures commanders to show momentum, mass is a seductive answer. The battlefield, however, keeps showing the bill. Watch the map chatter, and you'll see the geometry of the fight. North of Pokrovsk, the Russians seem fixated on driving toward Shevchenkove, worrying at the Dobropilia salient like a dog at a knot. Wargonzo's annotated deep state maps sketch the general friction lines. But even those sympathetic graphics are light on specifics in the days surrounding these pushes. When the most detailed Russian public assessment boils down to fighting is ongoing near one road, liberation of a tiny village, and progress toward a town that still isn't in hand, you're not reading the minutes from a breakthrough. You're reading around the edges of a blunt trauma. From the bird's eye, you can chart why the columns die. There's no infantry screen far enough forward to push drones back. There's no synchronized smothering of Ukrainian indirect fire. There's EW, yes, but not layered and persistent enough to knock out the multiplicity of senses. And there's time, specifically the defender's ability to buy enough of it. Once the first vehicles are bracketed, the panic phase begins. Smoke pops, formations bunch, and a convoy becomes a queue. If you've ever been in a traffic jam and thought, this is the worst, imagine it with a javelin's cousin humming in from overhead. On the bright side, nobody's cutting you off with a blinker and a smile. The Ukrainian response isn't just firepower, it's choreography. Multiple brigades overlapping sectors, drone teams deconflicted by grid and altitude, gunners walking rounds by tablet and habit. You can see the cumulative learning, how to catch a column at the dismount point, how to break a company into 3 isolated fights, how to make a tree line into a blender. When a BTR tries a sprint, it's met by a pilot who flies like a gamer with 3 monitors and a grudge. When infantry huddle under a berm, the hovering eye marks them for the mortar that was already dialed in. It's the defensive action summary, but written in scorch marks. Numbers matter because they point to trends. Destroying 9 IFVs, 4 APCs, 3 tanks, and 3 motorcycles in one sequence isn't just a day's tally. It's a warning that massed armor without deep suppression is target practice for a modern defender. Losing 78 to 100 soldiers in a single throw isn't acceptable losses. It's a generation of squad leaders erased in minutes. Multiply that by attempts over 2 days, then again by the follow-on assault, and you're not just exhausting vehicles, you're draining unit memory. In mechanized warfare, experience loads faster than equipment. Here, experience is being deleted. We should talk about motorcycles. Yes, they're fast. Yes, they're cheap. Yes, in some terrains, they're a nasty surprise. But in a sky full of optics, the guy on a bike becomes the world's most tragic DoorDash driver. He always gets there first, and everyone's waiting. As a recon wedge, they can mark lanes and spook pickets. but as a sacrificial wave to pull fire, they're just riding coordinates with exhaust. The Ukrainians have learned to read that script too well. Electronic warfare was meant to be the great equalizer, the blindfold you throw over the defender's eyes. In practice, EW is a tug-of-war of battery life and spectrum. Turn up the jammers, and the defender swaps frequencies or shifts tactics. Cut the link to the drone, and autonomous modes, pre-programmed flight paths, or simply another drone from another team takes its place. Even when EW is successful in a narrow sense, say it breaks a feed for a minute, that minute has to coincide with your sprint through a pre-sighted zone. Otherwise, the blindfold slips, and the defender blinks awake with coordinates already halfway down the artillery net. What about the Russian claim of local gains? A hamlet here, a hedgerow there. Local gains are real. They also cost. Between Mirnorad and the road east out of Pokrovsk, a small settlement reportedly changed hands. This happens in slogging fights that last weeks. But these battalion-sized lunges weren't about nibbling. They were about tearing. And you can tell from the quiet that followed that the tear didn't hold. If it had, we'd be seeing glossy drone tours through the new forward trench, not overlapping Ukrainian clips of burning hulls. Zoom out to operational implications. Russia can regenerate vehicles, badly refurbished, sometimes, but it can. What it can't rapidly rebuild is the trust structure inside a battalion that has been smashed twice in a week. Crews begin to doubt the EW bubble. Squad leaders start to wonder if the smoke is a signal or a shroud. And commanders, forced to show momentum, court a paradox. The more they add weight to the same plan, the more weight the plan has to carry. That is how doctrine becomes dogma, and dogma becomes drift. For Ukraine, the win inside the win is learning at speed. Every blown column refines target selection, approach interdiction, and the handoff between ISR and fire. But nothing is free. These same defenders who carve up assaults also endure relentless daily pressure. And the sector's very, very deadly nature is not a disclaimer, it's the weather. Expect rotations, expect ammunition frictions, expect the enemy to probe for a night window, a fog, a seam between brigades. In other words, expect the war to keep acting like a war. Where does the story go from here? If the Russians adapt, you'll see fewer daylight columns and more dispersed nighttime infiltrations, more decoys, and heavier pre-assault fires to punch a breathing hole in the defender's kill web. If they don't, you'll see reruns. Another grim procession of armoured carriers slewing off a road into a ditch under a sky full of angry bees. To break the pattern, the attacker has to do something radical. Overwhelm the spectrum, smother the tubes, and, most importantly, put infantry where drones don't want to go. That takes time, and time is exactly what these failed lunges are buying for the other side. There's also the narrative war. Viral clips create pressure on both commands. For Russia to show progress, for Ukraine to continue producing undeniable evidence of defense. Ironically, the single best argument that the Russian assaults happened at all is the sheer volume of Ukrainian footage of their failure. Footage from multiple different units, some overlapping, stitching a mosaic the other side didn't bother to dispute, perhaps because there was nothing flattering to say. As military propaganda goes, we advanced in this general direction is about as inspiring as a weather report. A quick word on caution. The most sober Ukrainian voices remind us not to mistake flashy failures for a collapsing front. The Pokrovsk arc is contested ground, where multiple directions of attack bang the door daily. Today's spectacular stop doesn't guarantee tomorrow's easy hold. The battalion-sized armoured assault is just one weapon in a larger box, and the opponent is still rummaging around for something that hurts more. Heroes get tired, trenches erode, batteries die, and somewhere in a planning cell, someone is pitching third time's the charm. War has a dark sense of humour like that. Speaking of humour, let's permit ourselves exactly one laugh line. When your plan hinges on motorcycles outrunning drones, you're not blitzkrieging. You're auditioning for a very short-lived travel vlog. Okay, 2. If your after-action report uses the phrase "suppressed all Ukrainian drones," and the next page has 4K footage of your convoy from 6 angles, maybe delete the word "all." And 3. Somewhere, an EW officer is whispering to a jammer, "It's not you, it's the physics." The battlefield is merciless, but even it leaves room for gallows wit. The human side is heavier. Those men in the carriers had plans for the evening that didn't include being geolocated by a quadcopter. Those drone pilots, cool as surgeons, will dream in crosshairs for the rest of their lives. Every burning turret is a family's phone call. We can analyze the geometry and applaud the tactics, but we should not mistake clean narratives for clean wars. This one is dirty all the way down. So here's the verdict, delivered without drumroll. These assaults failed because they were, in design and execution, outpaced by the defender's sensor-to-shooter loop. They were not supported by enough suppression to blind the eyes that matter, nor were they shielded by enough chaos to scramble the coordinates. They fed a modern defensive ecosystem exactly what it digests best: clustered armor, predictable lanes, and troops who must dismount under observation. Until those variables change, the outcome likely won't. The map will keep adding black scars where columns stopped being columns. But don't mistake the clarity of this episode for a guarantee about the next. The unfolding story around Pokrovsk is a tug between adaptation and repetition. If Russia adapts faster than it has so far, this sector gets harder for the defender. If it repeats the same choreography, the drones will simply edit another grim highlight reel. For Ukraine, the task is brutally simple. Stay awake, stay supplied, keep the orchestra tuned. For Russia, it's harder. Learn to fight the war you're actually in, not the one you wish you were winning. We end where we began. Engines rumbling, a road stretching toward a hedgerow, someone in a command post saying go. In wars of sensors and speed, advantage flips in minutes. Today, the kill web held. Tomorrow, someone will try to tear it again. The only question that matters is whether the next assault will look different enough to survive the first minute. And if the answer is no, how many more times will they press replay?